And I think we're live now. All right. Hello, everyone. This is very strange for me, actually, thinking back to last summer. Like going back, I know you weren't here, Janelle, but it's been very reminiscent for me.
Yeah, it feels like a million years ago, but it was only a year ago.
Yeah. So we started, and I'm sure, I started flying through it again, but I would like us, I think, to talk about where our experiences were with the Count of Monte Cristo before and what we're enjoying now, because I'm sure all of you have different experiences with it, or maybe you all are at the same place. And I've read it all before. So like the full unabridged version. So does anyone want to start first with that? Just so we're knowing where we're all at from before?
Well, I've never read it before. I've never read The Count of Monte Cristo, and I've also never seen the movie. So I am going in completely blind to this story. I have no idea, which I am finding super enjoyable. I love that I really don't know what's going to happen. But I'm loving it so far. Like, the one thing that I found amazing is that it's Victorian literature translated from the French, and yet I find it really very readable. It is so easy to read, to get through. Some of the names, stop me up a little bit, but not bad. You get used to them pretty quick. And yeah, I just find it's really so easy to read.
So you're walking in knowing nothing.
No.
Well, that would be interesting.
All I knew was that it was a revenge story. That was it. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Victoria, do you want to tell your experience with it before?
Sure. So I must have been maybe 13 or 14 when I watched the movie. I think there's like a 90s movie version, perhaps, or I'm not sure when it was made, but I've seen a movie version, but it's been so long. So like I have like a general idea in my head of the story arc, but like it's been too long to like really remember details, and I have no idea if that movie was accurate or not. Like I don't even know if they followed the plot actually. So if anyone knows that movie better, I'd be curious to know if it is accurate or not. But I want to rewatch it after. But that's the only experience. I've never read Dumas either, so it's my first experience with his writing, and I'm really enjoying it. I totally agree with Janelle. It's super readable. It's so far just like straight plot, and with like a little bit of tangents that remind me a little bit of Victor Hugo from last year when we did Les Mis, but it's not anything like that's been as long as Victor Hugo, like not that long of a tangent. But I feel like there is some of that, which I wonder if it's like a French style that was kind of accepted around that time, to kind of take away, like they kind of veer away from the story and then they come back like with some of the history stuff that we see.
Yeah, there's some set dressing in there.
Yeah, for sure.
I keep wondering if it's going to be part of the plot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but so far really enjoying it and looking forward to finding out what happens next.
Same. Everything they said.
So I have read the whole thing, an unabridged version 4 years ago. And so I remember a lot. And it's actually really funny reading this section because when I had read in 10 chapter chunks with my cousin, I remember reading chapter 20, which if you are watching this thing and you've never read it, we're going to go into spoilers because I'm going to spoil chapter 20 now. Okay. So chapter 20 is the graveyard scene where he's like, oh, I'm going to get buried. And he gets thrown into the water.
That was like such a gripping chapter to me.
It is.
Yeah.
So I was reading chapter 20 and I'm like, oh, that's the end of my section with my cousin. I put it down and I'm like, actually, I want to reread that chapter. And I just kept reading because it was just so readable and so engaging and I could not stop. So I went ahead on my buddy read with my cousin 5 years ago. And it's just such an engaging book. So I am actually really happy with how these chapters broke down because when I broke it down, I didn't think about where we were. And I was like, oh, I hope we don't like go before he gets out of prison, because then that would be really awkward. I'm glad that would happen.
Yes.
Quite well. But yes, it's been a long time. So I'm happy to reread this again, because it's one of my favorite big classics, I think, if not my favorite big classic. So
Cool.
yeah,
That's exciting.
So hello everyone who's here. So Tiffany has read and watched the movie. I got mad at the ending. I agree, they're very different.
Okay, so the movie doesn't end the same way as the book.
Yes. I do think that we did a good job keeping a lot of the heart of it, because the book is so big, but the ending was very different.
I see. Interesting.
Yeah. And Kelly's read half of it, so that'll be good to finish it off. And then in regards to tangents, I wanted to let you know there are some tangents, because sometimes they're all relevant, but it's more like you get a story of a person and then a story of another person, and then it's all related back. So it just seems a little strange and out of left field at the beginning. So yeah, it's nowhere like Hugo though.
So based on Kelly's comment, that makes me think that the second section gets more difficult.
The second section has a lot more of the backstories, I think.
Okay.
Oh, that's interesting, because it didn't start with a lot of backstory at all.
Well, no, I just dove right in.
That's when you get more like characters who are applicable to the second half of the story, and then like backstories to people who are in their stories and stuff.
Okay.
But, yeah. So Penny's first time reading it. Will be fun to have a bunch of first time readers, and I will try my hardest not to spoil things. I'm not going to promise, because that might be impossible, but I will try my hardest. So did anyone have anything they wanted to talk about in particular?
Christy, it's the first time you've read it? Your first
time? I've been really looking forward to it, because I remember hearing Krista talk it up a lot. So as soon as Naomi last year was like, maybe this one, I was like, yes, let's do it.
Yeah, it's been on my list for a long time.
Yes. And I agree, it is very engaging and easy to read, which I think classics get kind of a bad name. But if you look at classics, a lot of times of this era, the reading actually isn't that hard. There might be tangents, like with Victor Hugo, but even Victor Hugo's writing wasn't like hard to read. At least in translation, it wasn't. So I enjoy the accessibility of these classics.
Definitely. I find what I'm really enjoying is the time period, because I'm familiar with what's going on in England during this time period, but I am less familiar with what goes on in France during that time period. And so I'm really enjoying that. And like, by knowing what's going on in England, it's kind of helping me kind of slot things into place with what's going on, you know, because we're all about the Regency. I'm like, okay, that's very familiar. And so like in Jane Austen's books, you know, like the war with France is kind of always in the back. You know, she never really talks about it, but you kind of know that it's there. And so to get it from, you know, a perspective of who live in France has been really interesting. And then the other crazy thing, so this opens in I think it opens in 1815. I think that's right. And what's crazy is I have now read 2 books set in similar time periods. They're historical mysteries. And I can't remember what the first book was. It was a little bit later, though, because Napoleon was on St. Helena already. But I just finished reading the latest in C.S. Harris's Sebastian St. Cyr series, and it is set in 1815, and they are in Paris because he's gone to look for his mother. And while they're there, Napoleon escapes off of Elba and marches to Paris. And so I was like, oh my goodness, this is all happening at the same time. This is so great.
That's neat.
And so it was good because she actually did a really good job of weaving in a lot of really interesting historical details into the story. And I found that it helped me, you know, with understanding what was going on in the Count of Monte Cristo, because he doesn't really talk a lot about it. You know, obviously Napoleon on Elba is a key part of the plot, but he doesn't really go into a huge detail about Napoleon. And maybe it's because we're with Dante in prison and he doesn't know what's happening, really. Or he kind of glosses over those years of Napoleon escaping and getting on, power and then losing it again. He kind of glosses over that. So I'm curious to know if we get any more of that in the upcoming sections, any more of like the history or the political situation in the country, or if that really doesn't matter in the plot.
I think it's interesting to see how Napoleon kind of like just shows up in books. I feel like it's kind of like a Where's Waldo now for me with this kind of time era, because I'm like, this is, I think, like the third or fourth book where I've been reading a historical fiction that was written in Victorian era, and they're like, oh, and here's Napoleon. I'm like, okay, is this just now Napoleon's gonna show up somewhere? And I'm just like, this is now a funny thing for me where I'm like, oh, where's Napoleon now?
That's great.
He's kind of like Loki or a bad guy in Marvel. He'll just pop up anywhere, anytime.
Yeah. Or it's like World War II historical fiction where it's like, oh, now like that their historical fiction was Napoleon historical fiction or something. I don't know if that was it, but it's just funny to me now where I keep seeing Napoleon.
That is funny.
Yeah. But I thought it was really interesting how like Dantes is he's just so naive about the whole situation with Napoleon. He's like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go see this island. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he even thought of it like that. It was his captain asked him to do something, and so he just did it, and he did not ever consider the ramifications of it. It was just, I was just obeying my captain. That's it. Like, no further thought at all.
Yeah.
And also, he was naive as far as other people's ambitions, because it took him far too long to realize that people might have ulterior motives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because he
very
was so
innocent and young.
Yeah. I mean, he was, right? Like what, he was 19 when he was arrested? So I mean, he was very young.
Yeah.
And he didn't consider ever that, I've already forgotten that guy's name. The guy who he talks to when he's arrested. What's that guy's name?
Villette?
V4?
That's
that guy.
The guy. The one.
I can't pronounce his name either. That guy. It never occurs to him that guy might not be, on his side. Like, he's just automatically, oh, great, this guy's on my side. This is going to be fine.
I love
and then never considers. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I love the conversation in the prison with the Abbe, and he's like, oh, yeah, of course these guys were nice to me, even though that he was, like, going to steal this guy's girl. And, of course, they, like, stole this guy's job. And I was like, and then he's like, are you sure they liked you? Because you seem to take things from them.
Yeah.
I mean, because he even flat out said, this guy with with Mercedes, he was like, he even flat out said, I know the guy doesn't like me at all, but it's okay, we're friends. Like, he's just like totally oblivious.
Yeah.
It's very funny to me just how, I guess, like a little sheep he is, or like a little dumb lamb he is. It's just, oh, poor baby Dantes.
Yes. I know, it's funny that like the Abbe character, like, instantly can make the connections. He's like, oh yeah, and then that would have happened, and then this guy didn't like you because of that reason. Like, it's just like a no-brainer to him. And Dantes is like, wow, I had no idea all these years.
It never occurred to me. Yes.
Just too funny.
Mm-hmm.
It does make him, Penny says it makes him likable. I think that's true. You definitely, you find it easy to root for Dantes. At least I did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He definitely makes the bad guys seem worse, right? Like, it's like a mirror part of it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Absolutely,
definitely.
And definitely a little cinnamon roll at the beginning. Not so much at the end of our section, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is interesting too, like, I found when he has that conversation with the Abbe guy, and it's just instantly revenge. Do you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't even really kind of have to think through things. It's just like instantly, that's it. Now it's about revenge.
His system of morality is pretty basic.
Yeah.
I'll treat you how you treat me.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking about the one tab that I made. Let me see what chapter that was in. Number 34 and 24. So when he first meets the Abbey, I thought that was interesting. Like, it seemed to me a pretty complicated passage tunnel system, and that it was never discovered. Like,
Yeah.
holy cow.
There's
That's
some
like,
suspension
wow.
of disbelief for sure. Of like, okay,
Yeah.
how did they really get away with that?
Yeah.
I would have needed a pretty intense sketch of this prison to get that. We need the fantasy map.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I thought it was also interesting that when they were trying to plan an escape, and the Abbé was like, well, we can't go now because my tunnel led me to your cell and we're done now. And he's like, oh, well, we can just go out and overpower the guard and kill him and go. And it was like, his first thought was to kill somebody.
Yeah.
It wasn't to disarm the guard and put him in a cell. It wasn't anything like that. It was just, no, we're going to go kill the guard. And it was like this sweet, innocent Dante's who still isn't thinking ahead of things and like logicking out the whole why he's in jail. His first instinct is to kill.
Yeah.
And then of course, it turns out all the other things. His first instinct is revenge. So it was just striking to me that he never thought of another alternative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which goes back to what Christy was saying. I think like that his system of beliefs is very black and white, right? And at first he was so innocent and he just believed everybody and had this view that everybody was good. And then the minute he realized that no, they're not, and people have screwed me over, he instantly changed to, you know, now I'm just like laser focused on what I want and what I need to do to right the wrong in my life. And if I need to kill somebody else to do it, then fine. He kind of has this almost instantaneous switch. It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, the one passage that I tabbed, it's after, of course, he meets the guy. Edmund found some solace in these ideas. All his sorrows, all his sufferings with their train of gloomy specters fled from his cell when the angel of death seemed about to enter. Dante's reviewed his past life with composure and, looking forward with terror to his future existence, chose that middle line that seemed to afford him a refuge. And then this is what he says, and I think he's just talking to himself. But he says, sometimes, said he, in my voyages, when I was a man and commanded other men, I'm going to stop there for a minute because he's been in jail for 14 years and he doesn't consider himself a man anymore. He's not a man. He's a prisoner, right? Like, I just thought that was a really interesting glimpse into how he views himself. But he says, I have seen the heavens overcast, the sea rage and foam, the storm arise, and like a monstrous bird beating the two horizons with its wings. Then I felt that my vessel was a vain refuge that trembled and shook before the tempest. Soon the fury of the waves and the sight of the sharp rocks announced the approach of death, and death then terrified me, and I used all my skill and intelligence as a man and a sailor to struggle against the wrath of God. But I did so because I was happy, because I had not courted death, because to be cast upon a bed of rocks and seaweed seemed terrible, because I was unwilling that I, a creature made for the service of God, should serve food to the gulls and ravens. But now it is different. I have lost all that bound me to life. Death smiles and invites me to repose. I die after my own manner. I die exhausted and broken-spirited as I fall asleep when I have paced 3,000 times round my cell. I just thought that was such an interesting glimpse into his mind at that moment. And I think like he had been thinking of revenge, but at that moment it was all about, all I have left now is dying, and I'm going to die the way I want to.
Yeah. It was very interesting to read his perspective on things.
What's that poem that's like captain of my own fate? It's like a romantic poem. Shoot, I need to look it up. Never mind. That's what Janelle's quote made me think of. I will be the captain of my own fate.
Mm-hmm. So did anyone think anything interesting about the villains in the story? Because we have the 4, right? Oh, Penny's saying captain, my captain.
I don't think that's it.
From Dead Poets Society?
Yeah, I'm like trying to Google it.
Tiffany's saying there's a lot of plot conveniences, and there are, but it's just so much fun.
Absolutely, yeah. It hasn't really bothered me at all.
Oh, it's Invictus by William Ernest Henry.
I liked meeting all the different villains in their own ways and seeing their own character show right away.
I think it's interesting to compare Fernand with, what was the guy? Danglers? Was that his name?
Yeah, the captain guy.
Weird name, right? Danglers? Anyways, because Fernand, I can see instantly why Fernand would want to hurt Dante's, right? Fernand loves Mercedes. Mercedes loves Dante's. Fernand's like, let's get rid of Dante's. It'll be great for me. Like that, I can completely understand. But Danglers, I think Danglers is far more villainous. That he is evil, whereas Fernand is maybe just like crime of passion, right? Exactly.
He was the ringleader. I mean, he was the one to get them together and be like, hey, let's take care of this Dante's fella. So,
and for what reason?
Yeah.
Because he wanted to be captain and Dante's was going to get it. Like, that seems so much more, I don't know. Like, I just think Danglers is way more of a villain. Fernand, I can understand. But Danglers was, yeah, exactly. Cold and calculating, 100%. He knew exactly what he was doing. Whereas Fernand was so emotional, and in the moment, I don't think he bothered to think through what actually could happen to Dante's as a result of this. Whereas Danglers knew exactly.
Yeah. And I think in the film also they pronounce it Danglers as well.
Oh,
so maybe the French accent.
Danglars.
I don't know. So, yeah, he seems like the evil villain. And I thought it was interesting, too, because I have to read this has not changed since last year, anybody. I still can't pronounce French names. Still cannot do it. Caderousse? I don't know. But the guy who was just drunk and being like, oh, this is great. You could just get him to go to prison. It was like, yeah, he was drunk. And he was still very, like, mildly villainous, right? Yeah. He just was like, look the guy.
Manipulator, because he has Fernand who's super emotional and is just not thinking clearly because he's just like, I'm so heartbroken, and then you have Caderousse who's just like drunk. So it's like, of course, like he could manipulate these two people.
Yeah, it was very interesting to how that worked out.
And it was hard to end after chapter 26 because I was like, no, I got to keep going. He's about to tell the story. Like, yeah. So when Dante shows up at Caderousse's hotel or whatever it is, that part I thought was so interesting. Like, how is Dante's going to keep his disguise? Because he's got a lot to be emotional about here, and he's a fairly emotional guy, I would say. So it was impressive that he was able to keep his composure enough to get Caderousse to, explain himself.
Mm-hmm. I like what Kelly's saying, because he's like, I can't have her, nobody will. That's another side of Fernand. You're like, yeah, that's true too. He's very emotional in that moment, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, he's kind of got that perspective, which is just so interesting how they're all different in their, I don't know, perspectives and why they're trying to do whatever they want. But Caderousse is like, he's just drunk,
Yeah.
I think. And he's just saying the words and they're like, oh yeah, let's do this. It's like,
Yeah, he didn't seem as like evil intentions. He was just kind of like along for the ride.
Mhm.
yeah.
It is interesting to. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Villefort was definitely just trying to get his own things in a way.
Mhm.
And I liked his descriptions a lot of being a villain. It was like, yeah, he throws his own father under the bus, essentially, is what they were saying. It's like,
Yeah.
tab that.
Although that was interesting when his father came to see him. That conversation I thought was interesting, and it made me wonder about Villefort's actual political beliefs. Are we going to find out more about that? You said we get some backstory, so are we going to learn more about Villefort?
Well, basically what happens now, because we've had that time jump, and now we're in the where he's like going to go have revenge on everybody.
Right.
So, and the way he does revenge is like, it's not just where in a mobster movie, like they shoot you, he like cuts off all the toes and then shoots you. It's not gory, but like that's how in a mobster movie they would do it, you know?
Right.
So instead of just doing a quick and easy death, they would like, he draws it out. So
Right.
he's gonna do everything possible to destroy their lives first.
Oh, I would expect
That's kind
that.
of how it goes. And I think with Villefort, I don't remember like his political views at all, so this is not spoiler. But I think with him, at least we saw in this, he'll go for whatever side benefits him.
Yeah.
Like he just wants to be in the top power. And I think when it came to like being like, yeah, he would, execute his own father if that benefited him. And I think the only reason he burned the letter is because it would have looked bad on him.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have cared if it was someone else.
When his dad came to see him, like he seemed sympathetic towards his dad, and he did like, tell his dad how to get away safely. So, but I mean, that's complicated, right? Because it's family and then, political beliefs. And so that always gets very complicated.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, Kelly's comment on the screen there. I think what's scary about him is he's a person in power, and he's one of the only people that we've seen involved in the imprisonment of Dantes, who is a person who should be looking out for the little guy and should be looking for justice, but instead there's corruption. There's corruption in power.
Yeah. He has the chance to fix things and he doesn't.
Yeah. So. I think beautiful Minutia's comment there is, I was just about to say that Dantes becomes the very calculated one. You can see that already with how he gets to the island, how he gets his treasure, how he gets it off. And now even he's just starting his revenge, but you can see it. He is very calculating. He knows exactly how he wants to do this. And so it's so interesting to me because he's turning into donglers.
Mm-hmm. And I think he offered Cataros a chance at redemption. Like he was like, yeah, I have this jewel. But instantly his eyes were like, oh, I want that. Like, I want the money. I'm going to be, the sympathetic friend. And it was just, I think he had that chance at redemption and he didn't take it. Like he wasn't, his character was still there.
But would Dantes give the other three a chance of redemption? Because Catarus was the least, right? The least involved, the one that did the least. And so I could see if he's going to give anyone a chance of redemption, it would be that guy. But I'm not convinced that Dantes would be interested in giving any of the others a chance of redemption. And if he is, that would be fascinating.
Yeah. I don't remember either way, but I don't think they would deserve it because of their clear intentions, right?
Yeah.
They're clear benefiting from it. But yeah, and this one I agree. I think it only would reflect badly on Villefort if his father got caught.
That's true.
So
that's true. That's a very good point. Yes. Now that you say that, yes, you're right. Because it's all about his reputation, how he is perceived, and maintaining his power. Yeah.
That section about the politics that character was involved in, where every time the person in charge changed, his power would go up and down, and then his father, since he was on the opposite side, could help him when he was down. Like that was all very interesting to me. That's one of the most interesting things.
Mm-hmm.
The politics are complex.
Yes. Yeah. And that was another really fascinating thing with the connection to the book that I just read, When Blood Lies by C.S. Harris, that was set at the same time, 1815. And it was so fascinating. She really wove it into the story really well, how the people viewed the Bourbons versus Napoleon, and the fact that the people, you know, when Napoleon was marching to Paris, the armies that the king sent just defected. Like when they got there, they didn't fight Napoleon. They just defected from the king and joined Napoleon's army. And so he managed to get all the way to Paris without a single shot being fired because everybody just defected and went back over to his side. And so like the politics of it was so fascinating. And then you get these generals or these upper levels in the army who were like, okay, I'm loyal to the king. No, I'm loyal to Napoleon. No, I'm loyal to the king again. No, I'm back Napoleon. You know, it's back to Napoleon. And it was really like, you know, they were really, it seems like trying to gauge, okay, who's going to ultimately be in power here? Because I want to be on that person's side.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very interesting.
I think Dantes was aware of his involvement because he saw them all together at the table where they would have been writing that letter. And like he did talk about seeing the paper and the writing utensils. I don't remember if it was a pen or whatever it was that they called it then. But he saw them with this writing utensils. Although he knew that Caderousse had nothing to gain from it.
Yeah, I think he just put two and two together, and he was like, that was the meeting where they were conspiring, because he saw the meeting, but he was like, hey guys, what's going on? He didn't know.
He didn't know like, oh, wishes happiness.
Yeah. Like, hey.
Although I think Dantes would also have been like, he would have expected or hoped that Caderousse would have helped his father. And I think, do you know what I mean? Because his father, he was so upset that not just that his father died, but that his father starved to death. And so why didn't anybody help him? Yeah. So I would imagine that aside from anything else, he would be mad at Caderousse for not doing anything to help his father.
Right, because as the owner of the inn, like, how would you not know that someone was starving to death, like, on your floor?
He did know. He told him. He was like, "This is my personal suspicion: is he starved to death?" And he got. I think.
Why didn't you give him some food? Like, give him some. Yeah, it's not that hard.
As he's saying, yeah, Dantes was my personal friend. It's like, but I let his father starve.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't speak friendship.
So I'm very interested to see what's going to happen now, because we're about to get Caderousse's story. And of course, it's going to be from his own perspective, right? Making himself look better. So I'm very curious to hear how he tells that story.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be interesting, I think. I can't remember his story, so I'm very intrigued.
Mm-hmm.
I need to find out what happened to Mercedes.
Yeah. She just disappeared? Where did she go? And we haven't heard anything about what happened to Fernand either yet, have we?
No.
Or am I forgetting that part? Okay.
No, we haven't found him yet, but I think we will.
I have a sneaking suspicion here, right, Victoria?
He's the most, like, I feel like, dramatic one because love was involved. So we're absolutely going to get more Fernand.
Yep. Yeah.
It's going to be interesting, I think, to see how all of these people who had nothing in common before are going to have, like, the one person that they thought they would never see again in common again. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how he puts himself in, like, how he puts himself in their lives again, or how he invents himself around them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can we talk for a second about Dante's escape? Because, wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
pretty intense.
Big moment.
I know. So, I mean, you go from, like, he had honestly been talking about dying in prison, and, like, that was kind of like, this is what it's going to be. And then the minute he sees a chance, he just goes for it. And, like, okay, I know that he was desperate, but taking his dead friend out of his shroud, laying him on his own bed, and then getting inside that shroud and sewing himself up, like, there were so many things that could have gone wrong with this plan. And at the time, he thought he was going to be buried alive and that he could just get out. Like,
Yeah.
was he crazy? Oh my goodness.
I was trying to figure out, I was like, okay, how did he drag Faria's body through the tunnel? Like, because to me, like, the tunnel would have been kind of long, like not a short tunnel, you know? It's like, how did you get like a grown man corpse like through the tunnel to the other cell? And it's just like, how strong are you in prison?
You want to know what I was thinking? I was picturing Valjean in the sewers with Marius.
Yeah, that's like Jean Valjean status strength that you would
Well, that's true.
Just like the weight of a grown man's body. I was like, how would you get it through the tunnel?
I guess desperation makes you stronger.
Yeah,
Like,
you're just like,
Yeah.
I'm doing this.
I think it's
Yeah.
also got to be symbolic that he took the dead man's route out of the prison in order to get out. Like,
a
Yes.
rebirth almost.
what is that symbolizing?
Oh,
Totally.
Absolutely.
It 100% is a rebirth, Naomi, because, I mean, he thought he was going to be buried, but, you know, then he gets thrown into the water. And even like that whole scene of him getting out of his shroud and then bursting through the water, that is 100% a rebirth. That is barely metaphor. That is.
Yeah, true.
Oh, I loved his like inner monologue when they're like, "Oh, no, we don't need to say the prayers." I'm like, "Oh, you know," like he's like, "Oh, we need the light to find it." And he's like, "Oh, they need to find the shovel, obviously." You're just like, "Okay, what's going on?" And then it's just
Yeah.
like, toss. And the last line of that chapter is, "The grave of Chateau d'If was the ocean or the sea."
Yeah, that was such a dramatic last line of a chapter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Stop.
But then the way he gets off the rock when he sees that hat floating by and he just waves it.
Yes.
Well, there you go. You found yourself.
And it actually, it was very funny when the sailors pulled him onto their boat and then they talk about like this naked guy with the crazy hair and the beard. That was the first time it ever occurred to me that he would have really long hair and a really long beard. Like, I hadn't even thought about that, but I was like, yeah, he wouldn't have had his hair cut or shaved. They wouldn't have bothered in prison. Like, he must have looked, honestly, insane. Like, can you imagine, like, his hair and, like, this huge beard?
14 years of not having a haircut. That's some long hair.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the alarm goes off at the prison, and the captain's like, that's okay. We're smugglers. We'll take him.
I know. I like how they were just like, well, let's just keep sailing.
Yeah, and that he proved that it couldn't be him because he was really good at sailing the ship.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I was like, that too. I was like, how can you explain he's naked? Did you just take off all his clothes before the shipwreck happened?
The sea was so crazy, it tore off his clothes.
And I kept my hat.
Yes. I also would have thought, like, wouldn't he have been, like, so very pale? And honestly, like, if they thought he was another sailor, he should have been, like, tanned from the sun. Like, but they never even really...
I think they were like, if he's a prisoner, he's not going to rat on us as smugglers, so we'll be good.
Yeah.
Thick as thieves.
He was picked up by the right ship, I guess.
Yeah. Exactly.
So he's taken on 2 new identities, I think, so far in the first 26 chapters.
Yes.
Yes, that's
we'll have
true.
to see how many more he takes on.
Yeah. It's
I am definitely getting Red Rising feels from this.
I tabbed a very important quote that I think is, at least I think important, is chapter 25, where he manages to get the treasure. It's called The Unknown, where like after the treasure. And the quote is, the former Dantes proposed the argument that the later to the remedy. And it's like the former Dantes. He's no longer Dantes. Like, he'll
That's
be
very interesting.
People, but he is no longer Edmond Dantes. So it's like,
where is that in the chapter?
that is shortly after the beginning of chapter 25.
Woo-hoo.
So yeah, it's maybe midway through, but it's just before or right after he has like guided his boat around the island several times after loading all the treasure onto his ship, onto his vessel.
So it's even more interesting because the chapter still opens. He's still Dante's.
Yeah, and he's still called it a couple times, but it just says the former Dante's, which I think is just
That's really interesting. I missed that. That's very interesting.
That is interesting.
That goes back to Christy's theory of Hughes being reborn into another person.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And
so
I noticed
this is after he's got the treasure, you said, Naomi?
Yep, after he's got it all onto his boat. So this is after he's left on his, like, he's done his 3 to 6 month lease or whatever that was. And now he's got his own ship, and Jacopo is going to find out what's happened to his father and Mercedes. And he's on moving his boat around. And then right after that, it's just one little line, but pretty powerful, I think, for the next 800 pages. So
I'm just looking at my book. I'm trying to find it because I find that so fascinating.
What was that, Victoria?
Oh, I said he's no longer a sweet cinnamon roll.
No, he's very hardened. But I was amazed at his intelligence, like how they described him learning things in prison.
Yes.
Like how he learned so many languages and what was it, sciences and all those things in like the space of 1 year.
Yeah. Well, he just happens to meet the Abbe Faria, who is this like big scholar, religious man who like has all this knowledge and background, and he just happens to make friends with him, and he was a very convenient character as well, just him meeting Faria. But I love Faria. He reminded me, who did he remind me of?
The old priest in Lomez.
Yeah, he did. That's exactly who he reminded me of. That kind of character.
I just found it, Naomi, and I think you misinterpreted it.
I did.
As awesome as what you were thinking it would be, because you're right. He's sailing around the island, and he's studying it, and he says till at the end of that time he was perfectly conversant with the island's good and bad qualities. The former Dante's proposed to augment, the latter to remedy. Is that the part that you meant?
I don't think I have the latter to remedy part.
So maybe you meant another part. Maybe they really do say the former
Maybe my
Dante.
translator didn't include that.
My audiobook and my ebook are the same. They're pretty much the same, but
not.
There's like things that are missing from each of them.
Okay.
So I think it's hard to get a consistent translation.
And I don't know who translated mine. I can't find the name of a translator, which is weird. Although it could be because I may have covered it with my book sticker. But so I don't know who translated this. I have a Wordsworth edition. I have no idea who translated it. And it's interesting because I've heard like there are better translators. You know, there's good translators and better translators. And so I don't know who translated mine, but.
Yeah. Well, definitely Dante's turns into an interesting character as the book goes on. So
definitely.
He changes his personality drastically.
Yeah.
But this one,
seems like kind of like his morals are kind of like I do what you do to me. It's kind of like he is very much shaped by the people around him too. With Faria, he was a very different person than he was previously. And without Faria, he's pretty scary.
Yeah, hopefully Faria like rubs off on him and he like remembers the moral high ground. But so far it seems like he's kind of just a one-track mind of revenge. But like because they have these philosophical conversations a little bit when they're in prison between like well why would you just jump to murdering? Like is there an alternative to murder? And like Faria tries to challenge him on that. And so maybe that influence will come back. We'll see.
Hopefully.
As much as I love him, I think he's more like a one-note character at this point. Like he's very shallow in his reactions to things. he sees something, he just reacts with violence or with just immediate things. And I really loved how when he was at the island of the Monte Cristo and he tried to get everyone off, and he's like, oh, I'm going to completely injure myself or pretend to, and then just everyone leaves. And so that showed his quick thinking and his intelligence, but at the same time, he seems very one-note reactive or very a very shallow reaction to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's totally single focused. I mean, even that was very calculating, right? He needed a way to get those guys off the island because he wanted the treasure and he didn't want anyone else to know about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it'll be interesting to see how he reacts to other people too, because he's kind of a reflection of whoever he's around, right? Like if he's around loyal sailors or loyal friends, he's good with them. Or if he's around untrustworthy people, he's untrustworthy as well. It's kind of like a reflection almost in some ways.
It's interesting.
And Tiffany said once he lost the Faria, he lost his conscience.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a really good point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I did think it was interesting with Faria that Dante's accepted that this guy was brilliant and he learned from him. He learned so much from him and he was so impressed by this book that he wrote. And yet, until the very, very end, he was still convinced that the one piece of what he told him about the treasure, that wasn't true, that he must be mad. That the rest of his, he's brilliant, but this one part, he's mad. And so I did think that was interesting that Dante's just couldn't, he was like, I'll go this far with you, but that's too far. I'll accept all of this knowledge and learn all these languages and admit that you're a brilliant man, but it's too far for me to believe that this treasure is actually true.
It's still he's too naive. He's heard that from the governor and from this guards who are walking around. And so he just believes it. And he doesn't actually want to believe, it's something that he's already been told and he already has put into his, mental plan of what's reality. And then when he's finally told, no, this is true, he's like, no, I already know the facts. And he has to be retaught facts. He just can't examine all of the sides of the story.
That part was interesting too, with the prison people and the governors just automatically assuming that their prisoners are going to go mad. That's just the way it goes. We get them, they're prisoners, they behave this way, and then they go mad. And that's just the way it is. And we don't need to bother to change that because that's just the way it goes.
We just treat people like that. It's all works out. Yeah. I think that it was sad that Dantes learned the truth and immediately felt revenge. And, Faria totally felt sad for that. But he had to explain the truth somehow. You can't let him live in a very quiet, nice place forever, right? Mm-hmm. Like a little kid living and believing Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy are real forever.
Wait, what?
Sorry to burst a bubble. If anyone's watching this and still believes it, sorry. But yeah.
So I guess the question is his revenge going to be his downfall in the end?
Good question, Victoria.
Is he going to be a tragic character because of his desire for revenge or not? Or is this just he gets revenge on everyone?
I think if he finds Mercedes, he will be okay.
Gotta find a Mercedes.
That's my theory.
I hope that it ends well. That's the books that I like. I am really hoping that this isn't a depressing ending because then I will end up hating this book. But that's what I want, right? I want him to be redeemed at the end and, kind of get the girl and get some justice. But I don't know. I'm slightly worried.
Yeah.
I wonder if he'll end up working with Napoleon in some way.
Or against Waldo again.
Oh yeah,
I think at this point Napoleon's gone, right? I think he's probably at St. Helena by this point.
Gone?
I don't know. I don't think he lasted very long when he got to Paris. A little bit, but not very long, I don't think.
I did like that we had that time jump without feeling like a time jump. You know, it wasn't like 12 years later. It was like, oh, you know, we're in prison and we have all this suffering, and it wasn't that long. It was just enough. And then suddenly we're outside and it's been 14 years. So it didn't feel like we were getting an awful time jump. So I liked that transition way. I don't remember what happens directly next, but I am excited to see what happens and how all of that plays out. I do think that because there's like 800 pages left, at least in my copy, that it's going to be cool to see all of the threads unfold of how the story is built and how we, I don't know, meet the characters again in all those different ways, because now they are all 14 years older. They're all, you know, whether they were 20 at the time and they were young or stupid in love or whatever else, now they are going to be 35 and they're going to be hopefully more mature. You can hope, right? So we'll see.
I really liked how he handled the time that Dante's was in prison, because I was worried. I was like, this is a huge book. How much of this book is going to be Dante's in prison? And so it was actually, he did keep it really short, and yet he still managed to write in such a way that you understood the length of time for Dante's, that you understood how slow it was and how, you know, what's the word that I'm thinking of? That Dante's felt the slow move of time, you know, but he handled it in a really short.
Yeah. Tiffany, I think, says it great, like, was so monotonous, sorry, that it was just like shocking when he got out. And it's like, yeah, you know, the days felt forever, but it was also interesting to see that. And I thought that was also really hysterical when they were like at the boat. They're like, "What do you mean? What year it is?" Like,
yeah,
don't you know?
Asking me the year.
So many funny things about that exact scene.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, I'm just casually asking what year it is."
You know. Do you mind telling me the day too?
Yeah, if that wasn't a clue to the smugglers that he was a prisoner, like, I don't know what would have tipped them off.
Yeah.
What year was it in the end when he came out? It was 1820
29?
29, 26, something
29.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was 29. I tabbed it. I have to find my tab.
Because it was 1815 when he was put in prison. And then it was 14 years later. So it was 1829, I think.
Okay. So I just Googled it because I was curious. Napoleon is dead then. Napoleon died in 1821.
Okay. So
Thank
more
you.
Napoleon.
No more Napoleon. He really is Where's Waldo in history to me. I can never keep track of when he is where. Kept coming back from exile and
I would love to start making a note of whatever books I find that has Napoleon in it and just like see how many he pops up in. Yeah. That should be something I start doing.
Yeah. Fun project.
Yeah. But yeah, this book is really interesting so far. And I'm glad it's just flying through. And that's why I went and I tell people at this book, I'm like, yeah, he goes to prison and he escapes. And that's not a spoiler because it happens right away because it's already happened.
Yeah, for the length of the book, I mean, it does take like, 100 pages or more before that happens. But when it's a book that size, that really does seem like it's just the very beginning. So it's not a spoiler at all.
Yeah.
He's still in the rebirth stage at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Napoleon. He hasn't even become himself. Napoleon Easter eggs.
Yeah. But yeah. Yeah, you change a lot from the time you're 19 to like 33. So
when you're 19, you're like a baby. Especially boys. They still look like children at 19.
Yeah. And it's amazing, like the way the guys' faces change. Like when I look at my wedding pictures, my husband, we were 23. He looks like a baby. And I look like a baby too. And but his face is still that kind of chiseled. And then, I don't know, 30 or so, like men's faces really round out a bit. So yeah, Dante's would have looked really completely different.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And probably not getting a good nutritional diet in prison as well, and trying to starve himself would not have helped his like features either. So it would be unrecognizable. Mm-hmm. And when he tested that out on one of his like previous coworkers who was not one of the four, that was really interesting too, to see how like the guy had no clue. So, and then he paid him just to have a conversation. I was like, can't you just talk to someone and not have to pay them? Like,
but he's like, yeah, look, I've got all this money now. What am I going to do with it?
Just spend it around. I
spent 14 years with no money at all. So now I'm just going to waft it around.
He's flexing. He's flexing his wealth.
That's right. And when he shows that diamond to Catarus and even Catarus's wife, I was just like, again, like he's kind of showing his naivety. Like, who walks around with a jewel of that size on their person?
I know, right?
Yeah. Although I feel like if he didn't show it, then maybe Catarus wouldn't have been so forthcoming with the details because of being so conniving. Like, even though we didn't plot intentionally to hurt Dantes for that reason, he wouldn't have been so forthcoming with all those details if he didn't think he was going to get something out of it or something like that. Yeah. He was probably trying to be generous, but at the same time, it kind of felt, I don't know, like a lot of those where it was like, here, carry my bag for me and I'll give you money or something. I don't know. It was good, though. But yeah. So I don't remember what the next section breakoff is, but I have it here in my book. So we're reading all the way till chapter 46, or the start of chapter 46.
Okay. Oh, yes. 27 to 45.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
There was a question about what chapter that was in where Dantes was paid the money to his friend. That would have been close here, 25 maybe?
It would have been very recent. It was right at the beginning of chapter 26. Because that's right before he goes and finds Catarus.
Yeah.
So he comes in basically to town and then he finds someone that he knew and tries to fool them, which he does.
Yeah, and it was before he goes back to his old house, right?
Yeah.
It would have been before that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, any other final thoughts or whatever to add?
Just that I'm excited to keep going.
Yeah,
me too.
It's been a fun read so far, and I'm hoping it stays that way.
Mm-hmm.
I think it will.
Now, you've read this before, Naomi, so you can tell. Is this like other classics of the time period where they'll interject like an essay on something in the middle of the story? Like, I know Victor Hugo does that, and so does Melville in Moby Dick. Like, you suddenly get this essay on whales.
I don't remember any essays. Like I said, there's kind of a backstory. I remember in at least at one instance, there was a backstory, or there was a story about a man we never heard of before. And then there was a story about another person who was in that story. And then a story about another person who was actually relating to the plot. And I think that was later in the book. Not okay. But that's kind of the only way that this goes off in tangents.
Okay.
So it's not like essays, but then you're like, why do I care about this story? And then the next story will kind of tell you why you want to know that story information. So it's just like, you should have told that story after introducing us to this person. So out of order, but no real tangents like that, like essays wise that I remember. So it's very different in that style. And I'm very happy for that. It's definitely a faster read than Lemez, where you don't have to just sit down and like, okay, let me get through Waterloo. Let me get through the sewer system. So
we're all still traumatized from those chapters.
Yeah. A year later, it still hasn't gone away. But it'll be good. So, yeah. Well, I think I don't have anything else to add for this section because I would probably spoil something coming up. But when things are coming up, I'll be like, I have it right here. But I'm glad that it's been a fun reading experience so far because this is one of my all-time favorites and one of the few books I'd bring to a deserted island if I had a limit to bring.
Ooh.
Because it's just so good.
Ooh. And it's nice and long too, so
Another plus for that reason.
Mhm.
Yes. Oh, and Kelly is listening to the audiobook, which is going by very quickly and easy to listen to. Yes. Oh, the nunnery architecture. We still remember that section. Although Tiffany read the whole thing physically. She never cracked and listened to audio. So that was impressive.
I cracked.
Yes. I cracked early last year. Anyways.
Oh, your poker face, Naomi.
I'm hoping keeping it together. So yes, I'm excited for next section. Next section. I don't know all that's in this next section, but I'm sure it'll be great.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I guess we'll sign off and see you everyone in 2 weeks with the next,
All right.
next section.
Woohoo! I'm excited.
Thanks everyone for watching and coming, and we'll see you all then. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.